On today's episode of James on IT, we're going to talk about PowerShell and help you get more comfortable using the command line and become a master of the true power in every Windows system. Let's get started. If you're not aware, PowerShell is a very powerful tool that every Windows sysadmin should know by heart. Reason being, it's behind everything in Microsoft Windows. It allows you to automate so many tasks, allows you to do things like roll out changes and gather data on a whole fleet of computers. You can run commands on thousands of computers at once using PowerShell, or create virtual machines, check the status of hard drive sizes, and so much more. PowerShell is the ultimate tool that you need to know to help you become a better sysadmin and a more valuable sysadmin. So let's get started today in going over the top 25 PowerShell commands that you need to know. First thing though, before we get into those commands, to understand how PowerShell works, let's take a look at how the commands are built, just to help you understand some of the basics. So here in our terminal, we're looking at PowerShell window, and you can launch PowerShell just by right-clicking on your Windows icon and open up terminal, or it may say command or it may say PowerShell here, depending on your Windows version. If you're not sure, you can always just hit your Windows icon and type in the word PowerShell, and you'll see it here. And when it opens up, it may be a blue window or it may be black like this if you have the Windows terminal installed. So every PowerShell command starts with a verb. It's either add, get, it can be find, new, and so much more. After it starts with that verb, it has a dash, and then it says what the command is. That command may be child item, it may be block, it could be all kinds of different things. And that gets us started on our very first command, get command. So let's take a look and see what get command does. If we just type in get-command here and hit enter, it's going to sit there and it'll go through every single command that's in your system. It's a whole bunch of data, right? But this doesn't really tell you much. The nice part about it is though, you can use that get command to find other commands. So let's say we just want to see all the get type commands, all the ones that start with get. Well, there we go. How about update? And this lists all of the various PowerShell commands that start with update, whereas here it starts with the word get. Now, if you want to get more information, you can use our next command, get help. So for example, we'll use this command here. Let's pick a good one. Get local user. So get help on get local user and hit enter. And what it does is it gives you the information on, okay, the name is get local user. We already know that, but here's the syntax. What the local user is, you can get their SID, any common parameters, even an alias. And that leads us into our next command. Get alias. Aliases allow us to simplify the command. So instead of typing the long command, we just type an alias. So let's take a look at some of these examples. Like for example, if you're a Linux guy and you're used to typing ls, well, that's actually an alias for get child item. And if you're used to the old DOS command line where you type in dir, well, guess what? That's also an alias for get child item. And the nice part is, if you want to create your own alias, you can do that. First, let's clear host to clear our PowerShell command, which has its own alias of clear. So let's say we open up and we've got a whole bunch of stuff here. We just type in clear and there we go. That eliminates it out. So we've already gotten what? 5 different commands here thus far. Let's play with that get alias a little bit more, but this time instead of a get alias, let's use the get command, and we're going to see what commands in an alias. Remember how we looked for, okay, I want to know everything that has get or everything that has update or new or whatever. Now we can look at the other half. Okay, what all has alias? Well, it has export, get, import, new, and set alias. And each one has a different use. You can run get help on any of these to actually see the help information for those commands. But we're going to do a new alias. And this time we're going to have Notepad. We're going to do np Windows System 32. And we're going to look for, let's shorten that a little bit, notepad.exe. Now if I type in np, we have Notepad. And that's how aliases work in PowerShell. But what if you want something a little more useful from a system standpoint? Aliases and getting help and getting commands are nice. Well, let's take a look. What hard drives do you have on your computer? Well, you type in get volume, and that'll tell you what hard drives you have, what their health status is, if they're okay or not, what size they are, what file system type, and so much more. It'll give you every single volume. So right now I've only got a C drive on this virtual machine. So it's pretty simple. If you have multiple drive letters, when you type in get volume, you're going to see all the different drive letters and get a status just like this. But there's more. What about your IP address of your computer? Well, you can type in get net adapter, and that's going to tell you what Ethernet connections that you have, Wi-Fi or other things. As you can see, I've got Hyper-V network adapter because this is a Hyper-V VM that I'm running this in, and you can see the index there of the interface index and what its status is, if it's up, down, unplugged, things like that, and the name of it, Ethernet 2, allow you to work with it. Another helpful command, we all know what the task manager is. What about get service? Get service allows us to list all the various services that we have on a machine. Now, this is a whole bunch of data. And as nice as this is, wouldn't it be nice to be able to see or filter a little more? You know, we did a little bit of filtering with the get command program. So let's say you want to filter so you can only see which services are running on your computer actively right now. Well, you can run get service, and then you use this command, which is called a pipe. What this does is it pipes. It takes the output of the get service command and pushes it to our next command. Our next command is where object. And here we need to put it in curly braces, where we say dot status dash eq. That means equals running, and end it in a curly bracket. Now we see all the services that are running on this machine. Likewise, if we just want to look at stopped services, we can change this to stopped, and we'll only see what's not running on this computer. So knowing how to pipe the output of one command into another is extremely helpful to know. But this is nice. It's in the terminal. Let's say my boss wants to know everything that's running on the computer. But you know what? It would be nice to see this in a nice web format that's easy to view. Well, that gets us into our next command. Convert to HTML. We can take the output of this where object is running from the get service command and make it into its own little web page. That's right. We'll just call it services.htm. And now, if we launch that and open it up, here we have a nice web view of all of our services, what the status is, what it's dependent on, start type, who owns it, whether it's manual, automatic, things like that, which is a little bit easier to read than just a simple command interface. So let's say you want to take this HTML and instead we want a text file. Well, we can change this to text, but we need to change our command, and that takes us into our next command, which is out file. Without file, we just need to tell them where we want it, and we're going to put it in the current directory, and outputs it. And now we can use our alias that we created earlier for Notepad to open services.txt. And here we are. So here's the output of all the running services on our machine. Is there other ways to manipulate the data? Absolutely. So another command that we can use, let's say we want to get all the running, but we only want to see the name. Well, if we use select object and we type in name, that only gives us the name. So instead of us earlier when we typed in all the running and we see a list of 3 columns of data here, our status, our name, and display name. Keep in mind, in PowerShell, everything is pretty much an object, which makes it very flexible when working with these kinds of outputs. So we can grab just this column of data, such as using select object name, or let's say we want just the display name. We can do that too. So we can pull segments of data out of the output. We can even take this data and combine them. Like let's say there are other columns that we could have in here that we saw in the HTML output that we're not seeing in our terminal, as you saw. Well, we can select those particular ones to pop in here if we know what those columns are. Now let's say we want to compare something. We've got 2 different files, but they're the exact same format and same data that's inside those files. We can use the command, we'll clear this output here. We can use the command compare object to be able to see what the differences are between those. Now let's say you have a couple files and their names similar. If we look at what we have the services.htm and services.txt. Let's create a copy of this services.txt file. And here's another command that we can add to our list, cp or copy item. This is a alias. So if we get alias cp, we see cp equals copy item. So there's another one that we can add to our list. Let's go ahead and clear our screen. Now we have 2 files and, well, 3. We include the HTML. Asterisk. You notice I'm using these asterisks in these commands. What this is to represent is any characters in between here, this C and this dot, and anything ending after this dot. So if I want to filter this more, just for the text files, I can just put an asterisk here, and it pulls in, sees, okay, this has an S, this has an S too. We can also do something like this, where we have a single question mark, and it's not going to pull anything because we've got more than one character here. But if we put in 2 question marks, it's going to pull in services. The difference being is it's looking at only 1 character difference. So didn't mean to side rails too much, but it's good to know. But if we open up our services2.txt, let's make a couple differences. We'll call this one foo, and we'll call this one bar, and we'll put a cat over here. All right, let's save that and close that out. So now there's differences between these 2. And if we take a look at these files, we'll see that the last write time is different as well as things update. And this one's just a tad bit, just a teensy bit longer because we added a few extra characters. So if we use our command compare object, it allows us to compare the results of the output of 2 objects. So this is a great way. If you're used to Linux at all, this is basically the Microsoft version of diff. And what you do with this is you need to use a get content command. This is .text, and we need to do another get content. This is kind of a quick and dirty way of doing this, but it works. And now shows us the difference. Okay, our services 2 has this foo, bar, and cat. Our services.txt does not have those, and it shows us line by line which object. So our input object, that's our first file. Our second one is the cited, so it's your left and your right, and that's why we're getting these arrows left and right showing us the difference between these lines. So it's a very handy tool that you should know if you ever have a couple files, or you can use this on a variety of outputs. Like let's say you you can actually create variables. So like, let me show you this. This can come in handy. So instead of typing all this get content and stuff, you can actually put in file 1, and we're going to say get content. So services.txt to here, and we'll call this file 2. And now if we type in compare object file 1 and file 2, boom, gives us the same output. So this is just a shorter way of doing it. But the nice part about it is as you're working with stuff, and like we were getting those services earlier, you can actually put the output of that command into a variable and pull that variable into other commands, just like I did here. So know that you have that flexibility, play with it. It's a heck of a lot of fun. All right, well, we need to get back to our list of fantastic commands. So let's go ahead and clear this out. Another great command that you should know is actually checkpoint computer. When you run checkpoint computer, what it does is it allows you to take snapshots of your computer that you can quickly and easily restore from. So it's great if you're making a change to your computer and you want to save it before you make that change. Like let's say you want to test a program out and you want to revert back. Well, then you can do the restore. And that's part of every single Windows computer out there now that's running a modern version of Windows. I think they introduced it back in like, I know it's been around at least since Windows 7, probably longer. But it's the same thing as going in here and doing create a restore point. And I've obviously got this off in this VM, and that's why I didn't complete running this, but it'll give you a description. It'll run you through the command. And of course, you can always get help. Checkpoint computer to find out more information. Now let's say we want to see if a file exists or a folder exists. Instead of just doing a dir or an ls to see what's on your file system, you can actually do what's called test path and see if services.htm is there or not. If we type services.html, you'll see it gives you a value of whether it's true or false. The nice part about this program, and why I'm including it in our list of PowerShell commands you should know, is it's very handy if you're looking for, let's say you want to see if a program is installed on a bunch of different computers. You can write a script and use this test path to see if those programs exist where they're installed at. You know, if you know the program path, you could see if all the files are there or not and put that in a variable and check against each of those, and you'll see if there's any differences. Likewise, let's say if you're not sure if something is on the network, you know, we all know the command ping. It's very, very handy. You know, if we want to ping Google DNS, it's easy enough to do. Well, there's another command called test connection. Now, this program is quite a bit different. Your ping command, what it does is it throws out what's called ICMP packets, and pretty much everything out there will respond. It's configured by default to respond to pings. But just because you can ping it doesn't mean you can talk to it. Test connection will actually initiate a TCP connection to that other host and tell you if it's up or not. So here we see that we're doing a test connection against 8.8.8 and we're getting replies. Now, if you're in an environment where you run an Active Directory, you're going to love this next command. Usually, if a computer has a problem with its authentication against Active Directory, the way to fix that is by removing it, destroying it from the domain and then rejoining it to the domain. Well, there's a much easier way of doing this. You can use the command test computer secure channel. And what this does is it will actually reset your connection for you back to your domain controller. Now you notice this VM that I've got isn't part of the domain, so that's why I'm getting this error. So I can't actually run this and show it to you. I'll give you the full output here. We do test computer secure channel. Then what you'd want to do is you'd want to run credential, and then here you'd want to put your domain and your credentials. So I'm just going to use administrator. Hopefully you are following best practices and not using the domain administrator, but you should be using a separate admin account. Domain administrator should be something that is restricted for only emergency use. And then you use the dash repair, and what that'll do is it tests the connection the computer has to your domain controller and then fixes it using your administrator credentials. And I'll ask you for your password when you type this in. Another very handy tool to know about is the command invoke web request. The way this command works is it allows you to download something from a website. Now you can grab forms, you can grab entire web pages, or you can even grab files. For example, let's say we want to download a file WinSCP. Now it's easy, we can type it in here and hit download, things like that, and we could say our download now. But before we do that, what we could do so we can grab this button and take this link, and we can actually put it in our own little script here, so to speak, and use the command invoke web request, and we can put this in here. And what it'll do is when we execute it, it's going to automatically download it for us, and we're going to see it right here in our files where it's downloaded. And we can take this file and run it and launch it. So if we have a bunch of computers that we need to download a file to, or if you want to be able to pull it, it doesn't have to be necessarily a web page, but you can make it into, like, let's say you download it, you can put on a web server and download it that way, like an internal web server, things like that. And you can tell where it's actually grabbed other data when it was pulling in that web request, and that's what kicked off Edge to open up and download it. Let's go ahead and clear our terminal. But know that invoke web request is there. There's also another one called invoke bits transfer. It's another fantastic tool, very similar, but there's times where you'll find that the bits transfer is a little better than the web request, but know that you've got both. They do very similar things. Last couple commands I want to talk about is PowerShell has some standard security around it. So if we do a get execution policy, it can tell us what our execution policy is. Now the nice part about this is it's automatically set to restricted. What that means is unless the scripts are signed by a certificate, it means it will not run them. It'll block those scripts from running. Now there's ways to make them run by getting around this with the right permissions, or you can change that execution policy by using the set execution policy command, and you can say whether you want to bypass things like that. I highly recommend leave it at restricted, and instead you set authentic code signature. The beautiful part about this command is it allows you to sign your own code. So if you have a PowerShell command, you can create either a self-signed certificate you want to use using the command new self-signed certificate. And you can create a certificate using that command. Of course, you're going to have to add a few things in here. You can also use the make cert utility, which is part of Windows. These are giving errors because it's not in the path. Let's go ahead and clear that out. Otherwise, you have to purchase a certificate, but at least you can sign your own certs using your self-signed certificate if you've got your own CA or just want to create a self-signed certificate off of your own computer. But you can use that command, set Authenticode signature. You can use this command to sign your own scripts using PowerShell, and that makes it more secure because then it will only run the scripts that you approve of that are signed and authenticated using a trusted party, whether it's your own internal certificate authority or your own certificate that you purchased from a provider. The full command on this to run is your script name, PS1, and then what you want to do is, to make it simple, we'll use a @ and this is a get child item command, and we put the cert path in here, which the cert path, this is part of this is a PowerShell path, and we want to use current user, most likely is where you'll have it at, and then and we want to say it's a code signing certificate, and then we want to do the include chain all, and then lastly our time stamp server, and this goes to the P on path to net. I'm just typing in something random. Your CA. Time stamp. Dill. So by running this, now obviously I've put in my own funky path here, but by running this, you would actually be able to sign your script that you created. And just for fun, we got one more bonus command I want to show you, and that is get random. Get random always gives you a random number that you can use. This is great if you want to literally get a random value, and there are plenty of options with get random that you can use to say what your seed is, how many objects that you want, count, things like that. It's just a fun random command I had to throw in. So in short, PowerShell, as you can see, lives up to its name. It's super powerful. Work with those commands, have fun doing so, and you'll find out that it doesn't take long and you'll feel right at home in the command line. Be sure to take these commands, have fun with them, and keep learning.